The headlines across London are literally melting down right now. The tickers at BBC News are flashing a bloody, urgent red, and TMZ has just verified an absolute psychic shockwave ripping straight through the fortified walls of Buckingham Palace. Prince Harry's high-stakes, multi-million-dollar gamble, using his own flesh and blood, small children, as a geopolitical bargaining chip to hijack the British taxpayer for armed military-grade security, has just collided with an absolute, unyielding concrete wall. According to explosive global dispatches leaking out from the ultimate palace insiders, King Charles III didn't just ignore the pressure this time. He didn't just smile for the cameras and pass the buck to a committee. No, he completely, aggressively, and unequivocally shut it down. For months, the narrative weaponized out of Montecito, California was blindingly obvious. Give us our automatic, state-funded royal protection back, or the dying king never touches his grandchildren again. It was a cold-blooded ultimatum cleverly wrapped in safety clothing. But tonight, the fallout is proving to be absolutely, entirely devastating for the Sussex Empire, because the king has officially chosen the survival of the British crown over emotional extortion. Are we looking at the final, permanent severance of the House of Windsor? Is Harry's calculated bluff officially dead in the water? Sit tight, lock your screen, and turn the volume all the way up. We are diving headfirst into the exclusive investigative breakdown of the most ruthless family showdown in modern history. The global media apparatus is currently in absolute freefall trying to process the sheer velocity of this palace lockdown. To truly understand the magnitude of this scandal, we have to look directly at the chessboard that Prince Harry and Meghan Markle have been trying to operate on for the last 6 years. They thought they were playing a modern, fast-paced public relations game against a slow, antiquated institution that would naturally fold under the weight of negative American press. But what they completely failed to realize is that the British crown doesn't think in terms of the next 24 hours or the next news cycle. The crown thinks in terms of centuries, and King Charles just reminded his youngest son exactly who holds the sovereign keys to the kingdom. The controversy itself didn't just appear out of thin air last week. It is the culmination of a systematic, highly litigious, multi-year media campaign, waged from a mansion in California. Ever since the dramatic exit from royal life, the Sussex camp has relied on a very specific, high-risk strategy: public weaponization of private grievances. We saw it with the explosive Oprah Winfrey broadcast where accusations were hurled without a shred of immediate accountability. We saw it with the multi-million-dollar Netflix docuseries that painted the entire United Kingdom as a hostile environment. And we saw it in the pages of the memoir titled Spare, where Prince Harry quite literally detailed intimate family arguments for a global profit margin. But this latest demand was different. This wasn't just another round of reality television gossip or a complaint about who got which cottage on the Windsor estate. This was a direct, legally binding ultimatum aimed squarely at the British state and the pockets of the British taxpayer. According to deeply buried reports leaking from the highest echelons of the Home Office, the demand was delivered with absolute clarity: reinstate our permanent, taxpayer-funded, round-the-clock armed police protection whenever we set foot in the United Kingdom, or your grandchildren Archie and Lilibet will remain completely permanently exiled in America. It was a move calculated to exploit a grandfather's ultimate vulnerability. King Charles is 76 years old, navigating a terrifyingly intense cancer diagnosis that is actively being managed, but is fundamentally not in remission. He is a man facing his own mortality while simultaneously bearing the crushing weight of a crown he waited his entire life to wear. Harry's team looked at that fragile human equation and mistakenly saw a weak target. They believed that a sick grandfather, desperate to hold his youngest grandchildren and build memories before time runs out, would easily pick up the phone, override the British government, and grant them the elite security status they so desperately crave for their global branding. But the trap snapped shut on the person who built it. The moment Harry linked the physical presence of his children to a financial and legal concession from the state, he transformed a private family matter into a constitutional crisis. He forced King Charles into a position where he couldn't just act as a loving grandparent. The king was forced to act as the head of state. And that is exactly where the Sussex calculation completely fell apart. The institutional machinery of the palace locked its gears, reviewed the legal boundaries, and delivered a freezing, absolute shutdown that has left the California camp entirely stranded. Our deep dive into the legal architecture of this standoff reveals that palace advisors laid out the reality to the king with terrifying precision. Royal security in the United Kingdom is not a personal gift that a monarch can just hand out like a piece of jewelry. It is governed strictly by an independent executive committee known as RAVEC, which assesses threat levels based on active public duties. When Harry voluntarily walked away from his royal responsibilities to pursue commercial entertainment deals in Hollywood, his security status automatically shifted. That is a matter of law, process, and constitutional integrity. If King Charles had stepped in, cracked his knuckles, and forced the Home Office to bend the rules for his son, it would have been a catastrophic abuse of royal power. It would have sent a message to the British public that state-funded, elite police protection can be bartered, extorted, and manipulated behind closed doors using family leverage. The international backlash would have been immediate, furious, and potentially fatal to the reputation of the modern monarchy. By completely shutting down the demand, Charles didn't just save himself from a massive political scandal. He protected the integrity of the sovereign throne that his eldest son, Prince William, is destined to inherit. This brings us directly into the hidden logistics that the mainstream media is completely terrified to talk about. The narrative pushed out by the Sussex public relations machine has always been that the United Kingdom is an entirely unsafe, hostile wasteland for their family. They want the public to believe that the moment Archie and Lilibet step off a plane in London, they will be surrounded by uncontrolled chaos and immediate physical danger. But investigative sources closely connected to the operational realities of royal security have completely blown that narrative out of the water, exposing it as nothing more than a highly dramatic legal negotiation tactic. The king didn't ask Harry to bring two small children to a chaotic, high-profile public event in the middle of a crowded London square. The open, standing invitation from the palace has always been for Balmoral Castle. Let us look at what Balmoral actually is when you strip away the romanticized Hollywood fog. It is a massive 50,000-acre private fortress buried deep within the rugged terrain of the Scottish Highlands. It is arguably one of the most heavily fortified, professionally monitored, state-secured private estates anywhere on the face of the earth. The security infrastructure at Balmoral doesn't just turn on when a specific royal arrives. It is a permanent, elite, year-round operation. We are talking about a location that routinely hosts global prime ministers, international world leaders, and foreign heads of state who face genuine documented military-grade assassination threats. These individuals stay on those grounds for weeks at a time without a single security breach in modern history. The entire estate is a closed ecosystem controlled entirely by armed forces and advanced surveillance. Consider the actual practical steps of a family visit to this estate. Harry and his family could easily board a private transatlantic flight from California. They would land at a heavily restricted, completely secure military airfield or private runway in Scotland. From there, they would be immediately transferred into pre-arranged, armored palace vehicles operating entirely on controlled royal roads and private terrain. They would arrive at the castle gates without ever once interacting with a single member of the public, a commercial space, or an uncontrolled environment. Once inside those 50,000 acres, Archie and Lilibet would be completely safe. They would be surrounded by the exact same elite security umbrella that protects the king himself. They could spend weeks playing on the private lawns, walking through the secured forests, and sitting in the private gardens with their grandfather, completely shielded from the paparazzi, the media, and any theoretical security threats. The infrastructure to give them a perfect, peaceful, deeply protected family vacation already exists, has always existed, and has been actively offered to them summer after summer. The moment you realize how effortless and secure a trip to Balmoral actually is, Harry's entire public safety argument completely disintegrates into thin air. It becomes blindingly obvious that this has never been about a father genuinely panicked over the physical safety of his 5-year-old daughter and 7-year-old son. If safety was the only objective, they would have been on those secure Scottish lawns last summer, the summer before that, and every single summer since they left. The logistics are already solved. The invitation is already signed. The only thing preventing those children from seeing their grandfather is a conscious, deliberate decision by their parents to hold them back until a political and financial victory is secured in a London courtroom. This is a high-stakes game of chicken where Harry completely miscalculated the resolve of the man sitting on the throne. He truly believed the king would break first under the agonizing weight of family separation and public pressure. But Charles, whatever else his critics might say about him, spent over 7 decades watching his mother, Queen Elizabeth II, navigate the most complex diplomatic crises on the planet. He understands with absolute certainty the profound weight of not responding to an ultimatum. He knows that in the theater of power, the moment you negotiate with a threat, you become a prisoner to the next one. The aftermath of this absolute shutdown is now actively ripping through the Sussex operation, and the panic behind the scenes is described as entirely unprecedented. Their ultimate leverage has been completely neutralized by a wall of dignified royal silence. They are realizing with absolute terror that the public is beginning to look past the complicated legal jargon and see the raw double standard driving this entire scenario. Because while Harry's legal team continues to file endless court appeals claiming the UK is uniquely dangerous, the global public is starting to track his actual international travel habits, and the contrast is absolutely devastating to his credibility. To continue exactly where the first part left off, we have to look closely at how the global media landscape is assessing the profound legal and physical contractions inside the Sussex camp. They are realizing with absolute terror that the public is beginning to look past the complicated legal jargon and see the raw double standard driving this entire scenario. Because while Harry's legal team continues to file endless court appeals claiming the United Kingdom is uniquely dangerous, the global public is starting to track his actual international travel habits, and the contrast is absolutely devastating to his credibility. The forensic examination of this security narrative completely implodes the moment you put a globe on the table and track the actual flight paths of the Duke of Sussex over the past 24 months. We have been told repeatedly and with immense dramatic emphasis that Great Britain is a unique geopolitical hazard. We are led to believe that the Metropolitan Police apparatus, backed by some of the most sophisticated counter-terrorism intelligence on Earth, cannot safely navigate a couple of children across a completely private field in the countryside. Yet, at the exact same time this legal narrative is being blasted through high-priced public relations channels, Prince Harry has demonstrated to the entire world that when an international destination aligns with his personal priorities, safety logistics cease to be an issue. The most striking example of this occurred when the Duke traveled directly to Ukraine. Let us be entirely clear about the physical reality of that environment. It was an active, volatile military conflict zone subject to erratic missile strikes and intense international surveillance. The British government did not step in to provide taxpayer-funded armed protection for that specific trip. The state did not deploy automatic royal bodyguards to watch over him while he navigated an active theater of war. The Sussex operation did not cancel the journey, nor did they issue public ultimatums declaring the environment entirely unsolvable. They quietly mobilized elite private security networks, coordinated with local security forces, solved the complex transportation parameters, and executed the trip safely and effectively. The legal and analytical cross-examination here is entirely brutal. If your private security apparatus is sophisticated enough to safely navigate the logistics of an Eastern European war zone, how can you look an international audience in the eye and claim it is physically impossible to safely cross a private royal estate in Scotland? The moment you prove you can safely enter a literal military conflict, but claim you cannot safely enter Balmoral, the safety argument officially dies. It stops looking like a genuine concern for human safety and reveals itself as a highly calculated political battleground. This battleground isn't actually about the immediate safety of Archie and Lilibet during a brief summer vacation. Investigative insiders working within the British legal system have pointed out that this is a long-term precedent negotiation. Harry's legal team is fighting for a permanent, lifetime, automatic security status that would outlast the current reign of King Charles. They are trying to secure a constitutional guarantee that would legally and financially bind Prince William's future administration, forcing the British public to fund their security indefinitely, regardless of their commercial status. By completely shutting down the demand and refusing to intervene in the independent government process, King Charles has effectively cut the cord on this long-term strategy. The fallout from this refusal has sent shockwaves through the commercial operations in California, because their entire global positioning relies heavily on their perceived proximity to the crown. The moment the king establishes a hard line of separation, their unique institutional value on the global market begins to experience a massive, undeniable freeze. Look at how this institutional freeze is manifesting in the real world right now outside the immediate family circle. The international sports world, which operates on its own brutal calculations of commercial value, brand credibility, and status, is already making its own independent adjustments. This summer, the FIFA World Cup is dominating the absolute center of global sports diplomacy across the United States. It is a multi-billion-dollar corporate juggernaut operating right in the very country where Prince Harry and Meghan Markle have chosen to build their post-royal commercial empire. Yet, when you look at the public face of this massive international tournament, Prince Harry is entirely absent from the elite diplomatic arrangements. Instead, the figure operating at the absolute highest level of sporting diplomacy alongside international organizers is David Beckham. The history here is deeply ironic and highly telling for anyone tracking the social shifts behind this scandal. The falling out between the Sussexes and the Beckhams traces back to intense, entirely unfounded palace accusations regarding media leaks that were later traced back to a completely unrelated salon receptionist. The commercial consequences of those social fractures are now playing out on the global stage with total clarity. Beckham, who has publicly stated that whenever Prince William asks him to support an initiative, the answer is always an automatic yes, is positioned at the absolute epicenter of the biggest sporting event in American history. Meanwhile, the king's youngest son, living in the exact same territory where the tournament is executing its multi-million-dollar operations, is completely siloed away from the institutional prestige. The public reactions to these parallel stories are creating a highly toxic narrative trap for the California camp. The world is watching a highly visible international demonstration of who carries genuine institutional weight and who has successfully alienated themselves from the global network. It is an objective, measurable demonstration that choices have massive, compounding consequences, and that the palace's strategic silence is slowly letting the air out of the Sussex branding machine without ever having to engage in a public media battle. But the social and commercial isolation is nothing compared to the devastating human parallel that is now actively surfacing in every serious psychological analysis of this story. This is the dimension of the scandal that makes the entire public relations team in California completely uncomfortable, because it introduces a pattern that is completely impossible to spin. Right now, Archie and Lilibet are growing up in a complete, absolute vacuum, entirely isolated from both sides of their extended family. On one side of the Atlantic, their maternal grandfather, Thomas Markle, has been completely and aggressively severed from their lives for years. There are no weekend visits, no private phone calls, and zero digital contact. The Sussex camp has consistently justified this total extraction by pointing directly to his past conduct, his cooperation with the tabloid press before the royal wedding, and his subsequent public commentary. They established a rigid corporate framework of familial accountability. If your behavior damages the collective trust, your access to the children is permanently revoked. But the moment you take that exact same ethical framework and apply it to the other side of the Atlantic, the logical integrity of their position completely collapses. Let us look objectively at the documented conduct of King Charles toward the Sussex camp over the last 6 years of non-stop public warfare. He endured the explosive Oprah Winfrey broadcast without launching a single public retaliation. He watched the multi-part Netflix docuseries without authorizing the palace communications team to brief the press against his son. He sat through the highly personal, invasive pages of the memoir Spare, which targeted his character and his marriage, and he refused to file a single legal challenge or issue a public rebuttal. Instead of closing the door, senior royal correspondents have consistently confirmed that Charles has done the exact opposite of Prince William. William has hardened his position into an absolute concrete wall, drawing a permanent line in the sand. Charles, by contrast, has consistently left doors open, reached out quietly through trusted intermediaries, and absorbed significant public hurt without ever revoking his baseline grace. So if we are to strictly honor the Sussex doctrine that conduct determines access, what conduct has King Charles displayed that justifies the total withholding of his grandchildren? He has displayed nothing but sustained institutional restraint, quiet personal patience, and an open standing invitation to a highly secured estate. When you apply their own metric to the king, the mathematical equation simply does not balance. It becomes entirely obvious to the global public that the two situations yield the exact same tragic outcome for the children, despite having completely opposite inputs. Two grandfathers living on completely opposite sides of the world, coming from entirely different socio-economic backgrounds, yet both sharing an identical fate. Total absolute absence from the daily lives of the same two children. This identical outcome is the exact type of structural pattern that biographers and psychologists will eventually examine with absolute clinical seriousness. Because when every single grandparental relationship in a young family has been completely severed, the analytical question inevitably shifts away from why each individual relationship failed. The question shifts entirely to what is the common variable across all of them. That is the single terrifying question that no one with mainstream media standing has dared to ask Prince Harry directly on a red carpet or during a promotional interview. But it sits like a massive lead weight in the background of every single piece of reporting on this subject. Every single informed observer can feel the immense gravity of that question, even when they choose to look away from it to preserve their media access. And as the legal filings continue to pile up in London, the public is starting to see that the clock is not paying attention to any of these legal strategies. To continue seamlessly from exactly where the second part left off, we have to look past the endless mountains of legal filings in London and confront the raw, unforgiving reality of the calendar itself. The public is starting to realize with absolute clarity that while the lawyers argue over technicalities, the clock is not paying attention to any of these media strategies. The most devastating dimension of this entire global standoff is that it is a crisis entirely bound by the strict laws of biology, medicine, and human development. The palace has been meticulously precise and careful with the public language surrounding the king's health journey. We are told consistently that he is responding well to treatment, that his medical team is pleased with his progress, and that he is maintaining a highly disciplined precautionary schedule of public state duties. But every medical analyst and investigative reporter watching this play out on the international stage knows the unspoken truth behind those highly polished press releases. A condition that is actively being managed is fundamentally not a condition that is permanently cured. King Charles is 76 years old, navigating the most physically and emotionally exhausting transition any British monarch has faced in nearly a century. He buried his mother after a historic 70-year reign, absorbed a non-stop barrage of global media attacks from his youngest son, and received a life-altering medical diagnosis all within the opening chapters of his own reign. He is a man acutely aware of his own mortality, standing at the twilight of his life, carrying the immense structural weight of an ancient sovereign crown. And across the vast expanse of the Atlantic Ocean, his youngest grandchildren, Archie and Lilibet, are currently 7 and 5 years old. I want you to truly sit with those specific numbers for a moment, because they are the most critical, unyielding facts in this entire international controversy. 7 and 5. Those are not just random markers on a birth certificate. Those are the exact, precious, unrepeatable years of early childhood, where a child's brain actively constructs its permanent emotional map of family. This is the narrow window of development where the physical presence of a grandparent leaves an indelible imprint on a child's life. It is the age of ordinary, unscripted, completely unfilmed moments. It is the simple reality of being in the same physical room, hearing the specific cadence of a voice, walking across a lawn together, or sitting at a quiet Sunday lunch table. This is the exact foundation upon which a child builds their internal understanding of belonging to a lineage that extends far beyond their immediate household. That deep emotional architecture cannot be downloaded through an iPad screen. It cannot be established through a scheduled, formal FaceTime call across multiple time zones, nor can it be built through luxury care packages sent through Royal Mail couriers. It requires actual physical presence. It requires repetition. It requires the accumulation of everyday, boring, private memories that a 7-year-old and a 5-year-old will carry with them into adulthood long after their grandparents are gone. If that foundation is not actively poured during these specific years, its absolute absence leaves a completely permanent structural void. It leaves a quiet, underlying awareness that a legendary grandfather existed somewhere far away in a castle across the sea, but was never actually a real part of the daily texture of their childhood. That kind of profound generational absence has its own immense psychological weight, and it is the exact type of emotional damage that a sudden, forced reconciliation at age 12 or 15 can never fully repair. The ultimate tragedy here is that Prince Harry knows this profound truth better than almost any human being alive on the planet today. He has spoken with raw, bleeding, unmistakable emotional vulnerability for decades about the catastrophic impact of losing a parent at a young age. The sudden, violent loss of Princess Diana when Harry was only 12 years old became the absolute psychological center of his entire life, his entire public identity, and his entire motivation for leaving the royal family. He made the permanent, unhealing scar of parental absence the foundational core of his explosive memoir. He built his entire global charitable legacy, including his deeply personal work for children in Africa, around the profound concept of not forgetting the parents who came before us. He has stood before international cameras and articulated the crushing finality of time running out before the final words can be said, before the adult conversations can happen, and before the mutual understandings can be reached. And yet, despite possessing this profound, hyper-aware understanding of parental loss and the absolute scarcity of time, he is actively allowing the calendar to run out on his own father. He is maintaining an unyielding, hardline legal position that directly results in his own children spending their most formative years completely separated from a grandfather who is visibly running out of summers. The deep contradiction between the Harry who mourns his mother's absence and the Harry who enforces his father's isolation is a gap no public relations firm can bridge. The public is looking at this complete shutdown and realizing that the narrative of safety has officially transformed into a devastating stalemate of pride. The king has made his ultimate move by choosing strategic silence. He has shown the world that he will not allow the royal security apparatus of the state to be used as a bargaining chip in a family negotiation. He has protected the future reign of Prince William, he has preserved the constitutional boundaries of the Home Office, and he has refused to validate an ultimatum wrapped in public pressure. But the human cost of that institutional victory is an empty lawn at Balmoral Castle summer after summer. The infrastructure remains completely secure, the elite police forces remain completely operational on the perimeter, the private roads remain entirely guarded, and the grandfather remains waiting inside the stone walls. The open invitations continue to sit on the table, completely unanswered, as the seasons slowly shift and the pages of history continue to turn in one direction only. This brings us directly to the cold mathematical reality that no amount of Hollywood branding, courtroom posturing, or high-priced legal maneuvering can ever alter. The ultimate authority in this entire historical drama isn't the British High Court, it isn't the Executive Committee for the Protection of Royalty, and it certainly isn't a public relations team in California. The ultimate authority is time itself. Time does not file for legal extensions. It does not request court continuances to adapt to your schedule. Time does not care about your pride, your corporate branding strategies, or your unresolved family arguments. It runs continuously with freezing indifference in one direction only. And for a 76-year-old man navigating a serious, life-altering medical battle, the currency of time is the most limited resource on Earth. Every single August that passes without those grandchildren walking through the gates of Balmoral is a massive block of family history that is permanently deleted from the universe. The aftermath of this total royal shutdown is devastating precisely because it reveals a profound human tragedy playing out on a global stage. It is the story of a family that possesses every single resource imaginable to man: unlimited wealth, global influence, historic palaces, and the most sophisticated security networks on the face of the earth, yet lacks the simple basic capacity to solve a logistical dispute for the sake of two small children before the clock runs out. As the news tickers continue to flash and the international media outlets prepare their next round of explosive commentary, the public is left looking at the absolute quiet radiating from Buckingham Palace. The king has drawn his line in the sand, the institutional gates are firmly locked, and the strategic silence remains entirely unbroken. The demand has been completely shut down, the legal battle lines are permanently set, and the world can do nothing but watch as the final precious summers of a generation slowly slip away into the dark. This entire royal standoff has officially crossed the line from a public relations battle into an absolute generational tragedy. The king has made his move, the gates of Balmoral are locked, and the California camp is officially out of options. But now I want to hear directly from you. Whose side are you actually on in this high-stakes family war? Do you think King Charles did the right thing by completely shutting down Harry's security ultimatum to protect the integrity of the crown? Or do you believe Prince Harry is just being a protective father, who is completely justified in keeping his children across the Atlantic until his safety demands are met. Is the safety narrative a genuine panic? Or is it just a clever legal proxy war that completely miscalculated the resolve of a dying monarch? Drop your thoughts in the comments section below. Let us know exactly what you think about this absolute palace lockdown, and don't hold anything back. If you want to stay completely ahead of the game with the absolute raw truth on the royal family, make sure you hit that like button right now. Don't forget to smash that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell, so you never, ever miss our next exclusive, breaking investigative deep dive. Thank you so much for watching. Keep your eyes on the clock, and we will see you in the very next video.